Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, we dive into one of the most shocking turning points in James and Diep's relationship. But behind the scenes, a storm has been slowly gathering. James's father has secretly approached Nye's grandmother and offered her $20,000 in cash to deliver to Diep, demanding she leave James forever. The truth comes crashing down on Diep in the most terrifying way, revealing just how far James's father is willing to go to erase her from his son's life. Stay until the end, because today's episode uncovers the first confrontation between Diep and the man who believes love is something he can buy or destroy. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. Dust drifts lazily across the narrow village road, glowing orange under the late afternoon sun. Diep adjusts the basket in her arms, Nye skipping beside her, humming a song only a child could remember. The lane is quiet, too quiet, until a sudden thud breaks the stillness. From a shadowed alley, Nye's grandmother bursts out as if fleeing a fire. Her face is drained of all color, eyes wide, chest heaving as she stumbles straight into Diep. The impact jolts both of them. The basket slips, vegetables rolling across the dirt. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Diep gasps, but the old woman doesn't answer. She jerks back, turns on her heel, and sprints away with a fear so raw it looks unnatural. Diep reacts on instinct, grabbing Nye's hand and running after her. "Grandma, stop. What happened?" Her voice echoes off the tin roofs and mud walls. Nye clings to her aunt's shirt, her little fingers trembling. The old woman finally halts under the shade of a giant mango tree. Sunlight pierces through the leaves in harsh streaks, slicing her face into a mosaic of gold and shadow. She turns around slowly, and the look in her eyes makes Diep's heart drop. That expression, like someone who has seen something they were never supposed to see, freezes the young woman in place. "Be careful with James's father," the grandmother whispers, but the words wobble like they're too heavy to carry. "He is utterly, utterly ruthless." The wind seems to stop. Even the cicadas suddenly fall silent. Diep steps closer, voice tight. "Grandma, what are you talking about? Why are you running? Why are you saying this?" But the old woman shakes her head, tears spilling down her wrinkled cheeks. Her knees buckle, sending her collapsing to the dirt road. She grabs Diep's arms, nails digging in with desperation. "Your entire fate, all your hardships, they were designed by him," she cries. "James's father has watched you since you were small. He knows everything about you, and now he wants you to leave James. He wants you gone." Diep's breath snags in her throat. She looks at the woman, but the words barely register. It feels like someone has taken her world, lifted it high, and smashed it like a plate. "What do you mean? Designed?" she manages. The old woman's voice breaks. "He came to me 2 days ago. He said if I didn't warn you, he'd destroy everything. And now he's giving you $20,000. $20,000 just to make you leave James forever." Nye gasps sharply, retreating behind Diep, her tiny hands shaking. Diep's mind goes blank. $20,000? Why would James's father? The very number feels unreal, like it belongs to someone else's nightmare. The grandmother clutches her again, almost clawing at her sleeves. Diep, he's powerful. Too powerful. People say with one hand, he covers the sky of this whole region. If he wants you gone, he'll make you disappear. The wind suddenly roars through the rice fields, driving a chill straight into Diep's bones. She closes her eyes, but the old woman's words echo mercilessly, slamming into her like stones. Your entire fate was designed by him. He wants you gone. $20,000. By the time Diep helps the grandmother sit, the sun has begun to set, turning the sky a violent red. The air feels thick, like even breathing is difficult. As crimson light fades over the vegetable patch behind her home, Diep kneels among the baby cabbage seedlings. Her hands tremble as she scoops soil, pressing it gently around the roots. But her mind is somewhere else, lost in a storm she can't escape. Nee stands beside her, a tiny watering can in her hands, singing softly. When I grow up, I'll plant lots and lots for Auntie, okay? Diep tries to smile. She manages, but her lips feel stiff, heavy. A single tear slips down her cheek and falls onto the soil, mixing with the water dripping from Nee's can. She reaches out and pulls the child into her arms. Nye squeaks in surprise, then hugs her back, little arms warm and trusting. Don't cry, Auntie, Nye whispers. I'm here. Diep nods, but she can't speak. If she does, she knows her voice will shatter, and she's afraid, terrified, that if she breaks now, she won't be able to piece herself back together. The cicada's shrill cries rise from the bamboo grove, filling the air. To anyone else, it's just an ordinary evening sound. But to Diep, it suddenly feels like the world is screaming. Her whole life, her relationship, the future she dared to imagine with James. All of it now feels like it's hanging by a thread, controlled by a man she's never even spoken to properly. A man who thinks her entire existence is something he can purchase for $20,000. The thought makes her stomach twist. She drags in a shaky breath. Nye, go inside. Auntie needs a minute. The little girl nods and runs toward the house, the cheerful sound of her footsteps fading quickly. Diep stays where she is, staring at the tiny green seedlings pushing up from the dirt. They look so fragile, yet somehow more stable than anything in her life right now. Night falls heavy and fast. Inside the pitch-black house, the oil lamp's flame flickers uncertainly, throwing long shadows across the walls. The room feels too quiet, too still. Diep sits on the wooden chair, knuckles white as she grips her phone. It rings. Her heart leaps. But when James appears on the screen, something is off. He isn't at home. Behind him is a strange hotel room with unfamiliar wallpaper and dim lights. He looks restless, like he hasn't slept. Diep, he says quickly. I have urgent family business, very important. I'll be back in 2 or 3 days. She stares at him. Is everything okay? James avoids her eyes. Yeah, just some stuff to handle. Before she can ask more, Nee grabs the phone with a grin. Uncle James, bring me presents, okay? Okay? James forces a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Of course, I'll bring you whatever you want. Then his expression hardens. Diep, I need to go now. It's not convenient here. The screen goes black. Diep doesn't move, doesn't breathe. The silence in the room is thicker than the night outside, and the oil lamp flickers again, painting her face in an eerie, ghost-like glow, like she's sitting inches away from something she can't see, something that wants to swallow her whole. And in that crushing quiet, Diep realizes James already knows something, and whatever he's dealing with, it's connected to her, connected to his father's threat, connected to that envelope of $20,000 meant to erase her from his life. She curls her fingers into her sleeves, the tremor spreading through her body. The storm hasn't even begun, and she's already drowning. The night deepens, pressing against the windows with a heavy, suffocating silence. Diep sits alone, the oil lamp burning low beside her, its flame jittering like a frightened heart. She knows sleep won't come, not with her mind spinning the way it is. Every time she closes her eyes, she sees Nee's grandmother collapsing on the dirt road, hears the tremble in her voice as she spoke about James's father, and feels again that cold punch to her stomach at the mention of $20,000. $20,000 to disappear. The number clings to her like a shadow. For someone like her, it's a fortune. Enough to rebuild the farm, renovate the whole house, pay off debts, even start over somewhere far from here. Enough to tempt someone who didn't know love. But Diep does know love, and maybe that's why this price tag feels even more horrifying. She turns the lamp down, letting the room sink into deeper darkness. Somewhere outside, a dog barks. Rain begins tapping lightly on the tin roof, faint but growing steadier, like someone knocking on the edge of her heart. She presses her palms against her eyes. Why is James's father doing this now? Why involve Nye's grandmother? Why threaten people? Why throw money around? Why act as if her life is something he can buy and discard? Unless her breath catches. Unless he thinks she's the one destroying James's future. Unless he's absolutely certain that she will ruin everything James is supposed to become. A shiver crawls down her spine. Suddenly, the room feels too small. The next morning brings no warmth. Light seeps through the window, pale and tired, as if exhausted just trying to reach her. Diep steps out into the yard, the soil still damp from last night's rain. She moves slowly, almost mechanically, watering the cabbage seedlings, checking for pests, covering the tiny stems with straw. But her mind is far away. Every sound, the splash of water, the rustling of bamboo leaves, even Nye humming as she draws in the dirt with a stick, feels distant, like she's listening through glass. She doesn't even notice Mrs. Hoa, the neighbor, walking toward her until the woman touches her elbow. Diep, are you feeling okay? You look pale. Diep forces a smile. Just tired. Didn't sleep much. Mrs. Hoa squints at her, tapping her chin. Is it because of the rumors? Diep stiffens. What rumors? The older woman leans in, lowering her voice. Half the village is whispering that James's father was seen traveling at dawn the other day. And people say, he's looking into you, into your family, your past. Diep's heart drops. Mrs. Hoa sighs, sympathetic. I don't know what's going on, child, but just be careful. When powerful men start digging into things, nothing good comes from it. The words linger long after the woman walks away. Diep returns to the seedlings, but her hands shake faintly. Her Her stomach twists. Her breath shortens. It's happening. Whatever James's father is planning, it's already spreading beyond her control. He's moving faster than she can think. And worst of all, James isn't here. By afternoon, the sun hangs high and merciless, but Diep feels cold. She sits under the shade of the jackfruit tree, staring blankly at the dusty road. When her phone buzzes, she jumps, half hoping it's James, half dreading what he might say. It's not James. It's an unknown number. For a moment, she hesitates, but something in her gut tells her she needs to pick up. Hello. Silence. Then a low, familiar voice. Diep? Her heart clenches. It's Nye's grandmother. Ma'am? Are you okay? Where are you? Diep asks, feeling panic rise. The old woman clears her throat. Her voice cracks. I have something for you. Something I don't want to keep in my house any longer. Come to the back of the old pagoda. The line cuts before Diep can respond. Diep grabs her scarf, tells Nye to stay inside, and hurries down the winding dirt path. Her breaths come short and quick. At the pagoda, the air is still, thick with incense and dust. The grandmother steps out from behind a pillar, trembling. Here. She shoves a thick white envelope into Diep's hands. Take it. Diep stares at it, throat tight. What is this? The grandmother looks around nervously, voice dropping to a whisper. 20,000 in cash. Diep recoils. No, I can't accept that. You must, the woman insists. I don't want it. I can't keep it. I'm terrified he'll come back. He told me to deliver it to you. Said you needed to make the right decision. Diep's fingertips numb. James's father really did it. He truly placed a price on her, and he truly believes she'll take it. She holds the envelope as though it's burning her palms. I don't want his money. I'm not going anywhere. The grandmother grabs her wrist. Diep, I'm begging you. Don't go against him. Even if James loves you, his father will never allow your relationship. You think love protects you? Love is nothing to a man like him. Diep pulls her hand away, steadying herself. Her voice comes out hoarse but firm. I won't run. The old woman looks at her like she's watching a young bird step willingly into a storm. Child, storms don't ask if you're ready. Diep leaves the pagoda with her heart pounding, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand, as if the air around it might explode. Night falls again. Diep sits at the old wooden table, staring at the envelope lying between her elbows. She hasn't opened it. She doesn't want to, but just seeing it there feels like a threat. Like James's father is standing right behind her, watching how she reacts. The door creaks. Nye shuffles in with sleepy eyes. Auntie, are you crying again? Diep wipes her tears quickly. No, just thinking. About Uncle James? Diep hesitates. Yes. Nye climbs onto her lap, resting her head on Diep's chest. Uncle James loves you, so he'll come back. Diep looks down at the child, her throat tightening. I hope so, sweetheart. But she knows love alone won't fix this. Suddenly, her phone rings. Her stomach flips. It's James. She answers immediately. James? But the voice on the other end isn't him. Miss Diep, a cold male voice says. This is Mr. Sun's assistant. Diep's blood runs cold. Mr. Sun requests a meeting with you tomorrow morning. Come alone. The call ends abruptly. Diep slowly lowers the phone, hands trembling. Tomorrow, she will face James's father, the man who thinks he can buy her out of James's life. the man who believes he controls everything, including her. She presses a hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat like it's trying to escape. Tomorrow will decide everything,